Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another live Thursday question and answer show with Promethean Action. My name's Adam Sturman. I'm a producer for the show here. Today, we had a little bit of a staff change. I'm joined with Barbara Boyd, and Bruce Director is going to be filling in today for Susan. Susan had some family obligations she couldn't get out of. Bruce Director is on the board of Promethean Action, plays an integral role for helping run our organization. He's a chief scientist, and he will be joining us today in place of Susan. So to start today's show, I'm going to play a clip here that Trump posted on his Truth Social. I think Barbara thought this is a good place to start the show today. So let me just play this.
Where do I even begin with this? So let's start here. Nobody has done more to rebuild and save the Republican Party than Donald Trump since Abraham Lincoln himself. President Trump inherited a broken shell, a hollowed out husk of a political party after the Bush years, after the Ryan years, after the sellout years, and he turned it into the working class party, the middle class party. And he took states that had been blue forever. He took the blue wall. He took states like Wisconsin, states like Ohio, states like Pennsylvania. He pulverized that blue wall. How many Senate races have we seen where President Trump won a state by 8 points, 9 points, 10 points, 11 points? And it was just enough to bring along the Republican senator by half a point or a point to build that Senate Republican majority. How many Senate candidates has he dragged along to victory? And how many rhinos has he forced out of the party to elect real working class populist Republicans? People like, for example, Eric Schmidt, who represent the future of the Republican Party, where it is today. President Trump has raised more money for Republican candidates than any human in history. He has more enthusiasm and support from Republican voters than any candidate in history. I could keep going, Laura. The reality is, as he said, President Trump is dead on right here. What this comes down to is the Trump voter needs to show up in the midterm.
Trump voters need to show up in the midterms, guys. Stephen Miller's telling it to you straight. We have another clip here. I'm going to play this clip here from our trade ambassador. He was on with our friend
Steve Bannon.
Steve Bannon. Okay, here it is. Yes. Sorry, too many tabs open.
For you.
Yep.
Yeah, I got a metaphor for you.
Go ahead.
This with the press folks. I say, look, this is like a song, okay? And the problem is that the news cycle itself, there's things that distract us every day from the economic message, is like the melody. But the economic stuff is like the baseline, and it's got to be played every single day. And what we need to do more and more of, and better, is make sure that our underlying macro message is played across the diaspora, the media, every single day, rather than have our people get distracted and play firefighter on whatever's happened around the globe, particularly in the Strait of Hormuz and elsewhere. So that's what I'm advocating.
And I think most importantly, last night. So we're just going to review this truth here that Trump posted, because I think this is going to pretty much be the direction of the show. No one has given the Islamic Republic of Iran a greater opportunity to make a deal than me. Tragically for them, they have failed to take it. Therefore, today I'm announcing the most crushing economic operation ever taken against any country. This will be economic warfare and isolation on an unprecedented scale. Their navy is gone. Their air force is destroyed. Their military factories are now rubble. Their currency is worthless, and their country is hanging on by a thread. Today, I am also announcing that any country that allows its financial institutions, businesses, airports, or government entities to provide any type of lifeline to Iran will itself face tremendous economic consequences. Oil smuggling, swap lines, cash transfers, exchange houses, ship registries, front companies. It all needs to stop now, especially in the UK. You know who you are. This will be an economic D-Day, and we need all of our allies to stand with the United States of America to isolate and defeat the Iran threat. These maniacs are on the ropes, and these historic measures will cripple them and their ability to project terror worldwide. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Barbara.
Well, I think that those three posts taken together sort of give you an overview of the real world, not the world which is being constructed in the media narratives that are all being run against the imperative. The central, focus of the world at this point is ensuring that we win the House and the Senate in the midterms. The enemy is deploying every single weapon that it has to neuter President Trump. And people are getting involved in all sorts of side issues because it's one operation which is centered on America coming back, the globalist control being broken, which has existed for most of my lifetime, and a situation in which we can continue to resurrect the United States, not only as a power of good in the world, but as an economy which is advancing for our own citizens. And everything else, quite frankly, is a form of, as Peter Navarro said, distraction. Yes, it's important. We've got to know what the enemy is doing, but it's not something you should wrap your mind around. What you got to wrap your mind around is how do we get across to people what the president is actually doing, as opposed to the nonsense that the media peddles. So that's my opening. I think it's a challenge. I think we can do it. We are, after all, as I said in my video this week, Americans. We're resilient. We actually do miraculous things in very difficult situations. And we're being called on now to take those people who are out there. You're all out there. You know who you are. You're the people who delivered 2024 in an election which was too big to rig. And you got to do it again, except even bigger. And that's our mission from now until November. We'll comment on the other things to keep people focused. But the central idea here is, how do you going to get 10 of your friends or colleagues to go to the polls and vote? It's a very simple mobilization message. And you have to hold your nose, I admit, for some of these Republicans. But if the president endorsed them, then you should vote for him. Period. End of story. End of debate. And that's really the message, I think, for today.
Thank you, Barbara. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today in the chat. As you're joining the show, please let us know where you're viewing from. If you're on x.com, you can double tap the video to give us a like. On YouTube, please drop us a like. Thank you, everyone. Quick shout out here to Paul Trainer. Thank you, Paul, for joining us today. Diba Dora, thank you. Love having you here. And Melody Hart, thank you so much for policing the chat with me every week. Thank you so much. Okay, so Bruce Director, what do you have to say? Bruce, what do you have to say for our audience today in light of what's going on in the world? Make sure you unmute yourself. I had to mute you. Sorry.
I think that Stephen Miller hit it on the nose, and that's the thing. That's the kind of spirit that everybody has to have. The fact of the matter is, Trump is not distracted, and if you just follow what Trump is doing, and don't get distracted yourself, you could see that we're accomplishing some tremendous things. The Truth Social you read by Trump is really important, because it's been clear now for weeks and even probably longer that Iran is extremely weak, the United States is extremely strong, And Trump is reorganizing everything going on in the Middle East, completely restructuring the whole global situation. As he said yesterday in a couple of the gaggles, the Strait of Hormuz is not even going to be very important anymore. So everybody's been running around, screaming from the rooftops about how Iran has all this leverage with the Strait of Hormuz. And the fact of the matter is it's becoming less and less of a factor, and even the Iranians are having to admit it. So you see, Trump has a strategy, and he's exercising it. And I think the fact that people are so unused to actual decisive leadership that they get easily distracted. And if you have the attitude that Barbara just expressed, that Trump expresses, that Stephen Miller expressed, if you want to save the country, stop, getting the heebie-jeebies and worrying about this and that and the other thing. Go out and save the country, and that's the direction we're in right now. The enemy wouldn't be acting so crazy if they were winning. They know that Trump is about to pull off something that has never been pulled off before, that everybody says can't be done, which is we're going to keep the House, we're going to keep the Senate, and we may even increase the majorities in both cases. And Trump's going to come in at the end of this election cycle with 2 years left in his presidency, and we're going to complete the reconstruction of the United States, the dismantling of the global empire, and it's not going to be able to be undone by anybody. That's what I have to say.
Thank you very much, Bruce. I want to give a quick shout out to the YouTube chat here. It's a lot of people from Pennsylvania. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to my friends from Pennsylvania. I grew up in Philadelphia, so I feel like I have a deep connection to that state still. But good to see everyone from all over the world. I saw somebody from Germany. I saw a bunch of people from Texas too. Thank you, everyone. Gulf Coast of Alabama, cool. Eagle River, Alaska. We have so many supporters from Alaska. Okay, so I guess I'm going to jump right into the questions. So the questions that I'm going to be reading today come from our email newsletter list. Promethean Action has a weekly email newsletter. We have a daily email newsletter. And in the emails, I put links in there to submit your questions. So that's where these questions are coming from. So we're going to start right away here with the Middle East after I corral StreamYard here. Okay, so let's start with the topic of the Middle East and this new peace agreement that was just signed, the Mecca Pact that's on the thumbnail of this video. So we're going to open up with this. So Laurel says, I see that the UAE just announced a trade embargo on Iran. How big a deal is this? And could this be part of economic fury? Thank you for all you do. I think Trump maybe answered that a little bit already, but let me get to the next one here. Why is President Trump engaging in the Mecca Pact? Doesn't Pakistan and the rest hate Americans and want to kill us as much as Iran? Thank you, Mary. Barbara says, I have seen plans for the development of Gaza. Looks nice and a multi-billion-dollar endeavor. Who's going to pay for it? Who will get the contracts? I'm hearing that it may be Kushner. Not a very good look. Thank you, Barbara. And Andrea says, I don't understand why gas prices continue to stay high when we are being told that Iran is no longer has any control over the oil from that area. And do you think that if gas prices continue remaining high, it will hurt Trump in the midterms? Thank you, Andrea. So this is a very good selection of the questions that we get. I think it's a very good representative selection here. Barbara and Bruce, how do you respond to these to people that say things like this?
Well, I'll leave the gas prices economic stuff to our chief scientist there, Bruce Director, who most people don't know that much about, but he's really critical to me and Susan every single week. We really, he's our back end intelligence guy, just so you know who he is. And he's very, very important from that standpoint. Look, the business with the UAE, if you took the Middle East 10 years ago and you said, what flag flies over it? You would, anybody who knows anything about history would say, oh, it's obvious, the UK. It's obvious this is the relics of the British Empire across the board. And, you know, basically what Trump has done is completely change all that. A lot of people get hung up about Israel and Israel controls everything and yada, 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 but that's not really the battle lines here. Okay, all of that Gulf money, which is currently coming into the United States in the trillions of dollars to invest in our development, used to go to banks in London. So are you getting the bigger picture here in terms of what's really going on in this war? So yes, the UAE is the center of, or has been the center of, all of Iran's financial transactions. And them actually, number one, leaving OPEC, which is enormous. And number two, actually saying, we're cutting all ties, is a crippling blow, a big, big deal. All right, so that's one aspect of it. The Mecca Pact, I mean, I'm sure Bruce has something to say about this, but this is very important. These are all Muslim nations, one of whom, Pakistan, has nuclear weapons. People always have this argument, well, isn't the hidden story in the Middle East that Israel has nuclear weapons, and shouldn't other Arab nations or Muslim nations have nuclear weapons? Well, guess what? Pakistan has them. Now, is that kind of like a balance of power game? No, it's the beginning, you know, between Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. You have the biggest moving economies in the entire Muslim world now coming together to say, as opposed to what has been true for hundreds of years, virtually, we're going to develop Gaza. And Israel has got to come along with that. And Trump has got his foot in Bibi's, you know what, essentially saying, this is what we're doing here. Okay, we're doing economic development of this entire area. None of these states are going to be under this nonsense, which has existed since World War II, of being raw materials exporters with no capital development of their populations or of their nation states. And if we achieve that, we're on the way to permanent peace in the area. Now, what clearly is happening is there's a lot of people in Israel and elsewhere who fear that Turkey wants to have a new Islamic Republic, or that's at least how Israeli propaganda portrays it, to actually control the Middle East. There's aspirations, which Erdogan has for that. But overall, you've got to remember that America is in charge here, not the UK. So we're not playing the game anymore of playing religions off against one another. We're looking for stability in order to be able to do economic development. And that's really the significance of what I think that accord is and the directionality we're headed in. So that's an overview. I'm sure Bruce can answer the question better than I, to give you just a short summary of why gas prices are what they are. A lot of it has to do with what the president has said in terms of refining capacity, the actual physical economy. We don't have huge refineries in the United States. Most people don't take that into account. And the oil companies are still very much in Wall Street's pocket. So that's the fight that's going on around gas prices. I'm sure Bruce can add something to what I just said.
Yeah, the biggest factor in gas prices is exactly that right now. It's refining capacity. The U.S. has not built any new refineries in decades. And the actual refineries we have are not really geared towards refining the oil that we produce in the United States. They were all geared towards refining Venezuelan oil, which is a heavy crude, as opposed to the light crude, which we produce here. So there is a new refinery that's being constructed in Texas. There's a lot of things that are being done in terms of environmental regulations and loosening up regulations that Trump has implemented and Secretary Wright is pushing, which can lead to some increases in refining capacity. And it's a very complicated thing. For example, California doesn't actually use any refined products that are produced in the United States. They actually are importing oil and importing refined products because of their crazy environmental stuff. And you know, Trump has done things like suspending the Jones Act so that we can ship refined products around the United States much easier. So there's a lot of things that are being done which will help loosen that up. And also, you know, the war in Ukraine has a lot to do with it, because Russia was actually a major exporter of diesel fuel. And with Russia's, after the Ukrainian attacks on Russian refining capacity, Russia stopped exporting diesel fuel. Even during the war, they were exporting, I think, 20% of the diesel fuel, a lot of which was used in other places. So that was driving up prices. And also China has cut back their oil imports by about, I think, 5 billion barrels a day. But that was not oil that was being consumed in China. They were refining that oil and exporting refined products. So all of this is leading to keeping the gas prices a bit high. And Trump is on it. He's putting pressure on the oil companies and so forth. So and gas prices are coming down. I mean, I know in California they're close to $7. Adam can maybe verify if that's true. That's what I've heard. But in Indiana, they're $3.29. Here in Northern Virginia, it's $3.80. It was $3.50 in other parts of Virginia. So the oil gas prices are coming down, and I expect that they will continue, especially as we get out of the summer season and we start getting into the fall. As far as the Mecca Pact goes, this is really, really important. And you have to look at this in the context of what Trump's done in the Board of Peace. And I think the best way to look at this is what Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres said when they signed the Oslo Accords. You don't make peace with your friends. You make peace with your enemies. And what Trump has done here is gotten people who are and have been and considered each other enemies to sit down together and actually make peace. And look at just really quickly. Look, you had the Kushner trip to Egypt where he met with Hamas. Hamas agreed to disarm. You have the process in Lebanon where the Lebanese government is disarming Hezbollah. You have the situation in Syria where Syria has cut off the land route from Iran into Hezbollah. All these, that you have the attacks on the Houthis. The Saudis have always been worried about Iran. So is the UAE, and so has Pakistan. And they've always been opposed to Iran having a nuclear weapon. But they've always been afraid to actually do something about it because of the way the British have always manipulated the Middle Eastern geopolitics. So with Trump asserting himself, the U.S. is going to be involved. The U.S. is going to be involved from the standpoint of strength. And our goal here is to make peace, not to perpetuate war, and has done what everybody said couldn't be done. That is giving people the confidence that this thing has to be brought to a conclusion. And that's what is really behind the Mecca Pact. And I think it's very important that Trump came out and publicly supported it, because admittedly it was not clear what all the implications were about it. But when Trump came out last week and said this was a good development, I guarantee you he's not just wishful thinking on that.
Yeah, I just want to add one comment on this Kushner stuff, and the attacks on Trump's family. If the Democrats had their way, or if the media had their way, his entire family is supposed to be paupers in monk's clothing at this point, not doing anything in the real world. They're just supposed to sort of go off somewhere and live in the desert or something. All right. They're not part of the administration. Kushner's acting as a special envoy. They are trying to make money for their businesses. All right. That's true. Does that represent a conflict? You can bet that basically every lawyer in the world, the best lawyers in the world, are being deployed to ensure that there's no there there if somebody, basically comes after them for what they're doing. All right. But it's kind of insane. And Trump says it himself. I really feel bad for my family because they've been smeared all over the place simply because they're his family. And it's kind of disgusting, to tell you the truth. With respect to Jared, having contacts with these Gulf, people, he's had them even before he actually did the Abraham Accords. This is the way things work in this part of the world. It's an insult if you don't take whatever gifts some of these people would like to give you. It's considered to be a cultural violation. So, people are playing around with this stuff, and it's really, in my view, quite disgusting, and not really in any kind of reality. So that's how I put it. The plans for Gaza were put forward in the first Abraham Accord announcements, and truly it would be, basically what was planned there is the beginning creation of a second state with a huge tunnel constructed between Gaza and the West Bank, which are now unlinked in Israel, linking up those two places and creating the basis for a true economic development zone. So that's what it's about. And people are attacking it for various reasons, most of whom, again, the issue is Donald Trump, and any way they can smear him, they're going to try and smear him, including using his family's business objectives to actually say somehow he's on the take, etc., which is a very big current line of attack at this point.
Let me just add one other thing that people need to be aware of, that there's a new generation in the Middle East which is coming up. You see this around MBS in Saudi Arabia, MBZ in the UAE, a lot of young entrepreneurs, people in their 20s, 30s, early 40s, who many of whom have been educated in the United States, many of whom have been involved in industrial investments, and in Israel too. Israel has a major innovation, especially in robotics, AI, biopharmaceuticals, et cetera, et cetera. So this younger generation does not want a repeat of a 30 years war. They don't want to spend their life in war. They want trade, they want economic development, and they see an opportunity for working together in these frontier areas that they can mutually benefit from each other. Turkey also has a thriving innovation economy in some areas. It's Lebanon. People some of the Lebanese diaspora, young people in their 20s, 30s, are coming back to Lebanon despite its difficulties, wanting to set up startup companies, innovative companies. They want to work with the Israelis. They want to work with the Saudis. This dynamic is the one that we have to support. We have to encourage, and that's the countervailing tendency to the craziness which has dominated the area. So don't be so fixed in old ideas as to how things work over there.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you to all the people that are tuning in. So much love and support. Let me continue here. So first, I want to say thank you to Chai Guy. I wish I could pull up your super sticker, but I can't. I don't remember seeing your name here, so thank you for joining us. I want to remind everyone that we do this one live show a week, but we do 3 other pre-recorded political briefings. So please make sure you're subscribed here on YouTube, or if you're watching on x.com, make sure you're following us on X. We post the stuff on X too. So Chai Guy, please make sure you're subscribed. And if you really enjoy what we're saying and you want to stay in touch with us, I really recommend you get anyone who's listening, we have a free email newsletter. I have both a weekly and a daily subscription, depending on your preference. And if you'd like to support us, with a $10 a month sustaining subscription. You can also do that. Again, just hit the free email newsletter link. You'll be prompted with all the options when you sign up. Okay. And I want to jump here to Kevin. Thank you for joining us again today, Kevin. Always enjoy having you here with your questions. Kevin says, what is the future status of Venezuela? A U.S. territory or compact or free association with the U.S. military bases moved U.S. troops from closed Spain bases. Barbara and Bruce, what is the future of Venezuela in our relationship with the United States?
Well, I think you got to look at it in the context of what's going on in Latin America much more generally. If you think about what our neighbors to the south were really like over the last 20, 30-year period, their economies had been basically collapsed into being centered in the drug trade, to be blunt, or other nefarious types of things, which was what was going on in Venezuela as a laundry point. And China was moving, completely into the area and becoming a very dominant power in terms of financing and everything else, because the IMF is, basically against any kind of development, economic development of these places. What's being talked about in terms of Venezuela is that it will remain a nation state. It will develop again into a nation state. It will hold elections. I heard Marco Rubio talking about this just last week, and he said, basically, we're not ready yet to transition to elections in terms of where the population is in terms of development. The actual support for Hugo Chavez and for Maduro, actually came from the very poorest people in that country, who are dirt poor and very easily organized into mobs because of their extraordinary poverty. What the United States is looking at is, how do we actually develop that economy so that you have a mature political operation that can actually function as a nation state. So we're not looking at making it I don't believe we're looking at making it a U.S. territory or a compact of free association, although there may be a developmental stage which is like that. The ultimate goal here is to have nation states again in the world who can function independently and develop their people according to their own various cultures. And that, I think, is at the center of our foreign policy view. If you actually read the national security strategy, you'll see that what was hoped for is a complete reorientation of our national security strategy to the Western Hemisphere and to the Pacific, away from Europe and the Middle East. Obviously, the Iran war has us a little bit stuck right now, as Trump calls it. We're having an excursion in the Middle East. But the overall plan of attack here is to go back to developing our own hemisphere, turning it from a drug plantation and dirty money laundry operation and, enslaved nation states, which is what it was, back into something akin to what it was like, say, at the end of World War II, where there was actual development going on. That's, all of these countries were critical in the founding of the Bretton Woods. They were much, much more developed states at that point in time. It was only under Kissinger that we got into this idea that these countries should not be developed at all. They should be essentially exploited for the raw materials, and we have to limit their populations because of this kind of Malthusian worldview, which Kissinger and other stooges of the City of London actually had and implemented. So that's a long answer, but I think that's my sense of where we're headed.
The other thing on Ibero-America to watch is Cuba. The U.S. Discussions and back-channel relations with Cuba right now are extremely intense. Secretary Rubio has hinted at this in some of his public statements in an interview he gave last week, I guess, on the Katie Miller podcast, which is really, I recommend it. It's fun to watch. He's hilarious, and so is his wife. But he says in there in a serious moment that he expects that before the end of Trump's term, Cuba is going to be a completely different country. And the role that Cuba is playing in the world and in Latin America is going to be completely transformed. So I think that this is a very well thought out and active program that the president and his administration has with reasserting the Monroe Doctrine, asserting American dominance and good neighbor policy in the Western Hemisphere. As Barbara said, China has moved in here, and it's hasn't been friendly to the United States nor to these countries. They want the United States back in. They want the Monroe Doctrine, and I think that's the direction we're going. And thank God we have a president and administration that believes in it.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone tuning in. And thank you, Kevin, for sending in your question. Always love bringing them up here, taking them. All right. Before I get to the next question, I'm going to throw this. What should we discuss next? So to vote in this little thing here, just make sure you put a single number on a line. So just put the number and that's it, and send it in the chat, and that's how your vote will get counted. So take a quick vote here, and I'm going to pull up the next question here from Mother of Pearl. Mother of Pearl says, any thoughts on the U.S. going back to a metals, gold, silver-backed currency when the dust settles in all POTUS is trying to get accomplished? Curious, as they seem to be continually manipulated. Yeah, this is a question that comes up all the time. What is the role of the U.S. potentially going back to metal, gold, and silver-backed currency? Is this actually happening?
Don't know. I think that, we want to get back to a gold reserve standard. A lot of people have different views as to what a gold-backed currency is. It's not a gold standard in the sense that every dollar has to be backed by an ounce of a certain percentage, a certain amount of gold. But under the Bretton Woods system, the dollar, you had a gold reserve standard. And there are various proposals out there as to what kind of mechanism would actually occur. But the basic thing that leads to a stable currency relations between the United States dollar and the rest of the world is the physical productivity of the U.S. economy. The money is not what determines production. It's production which determines the value of the money. And if you look at what Trump is doing in terms of the regulation, in terms of the tariffs, in terms of the investment program that he has, we've got a boom going in industrial investment and productivity, real physical production in the United States. And to the extent that that continues, that's going to bolster the value of the dollar. And, what other mechanism you use to balance it with respect to other currencies is of secondary importance to whether or not you actually have a functioning physical economy.
Thank you, Bruce. Barbara, any thoughts?
No, I think what he said, I mean, when people look at the manipulation of these currencies on the markets, that's what they're talking about. Because off of the dissolution of Bretton Woods in 1971, we got into, currency manipulation, precious metals manipulation, commodities, etc. And they really have nothing to do with fundamental economic production, which is really the difference between what we used to measure ourselves by and money, whether it takes the form of, Bitcoin, whether it takes the form of gold or silver or speculation in these metals. The issue really is, as Bruce said, what are you producing that guarantees that your economy is going to grow at a faster rate than the resources you're using up in terms of the future? That's really the issue of physical economy versus the issue of money over here. And money should be, in whatever form it takes, an instrument of that physical production. It should facilitate it. What we've seen prior to Trump is that the two parts of the economy, the credit and money side and the physical economy side, basically, it is like basically you had this tick called the money system draining the entire blood of the physical economy and eating it up, cannibalizing it. And that's what we all experienced in our lifetimes up to Donald Trump. And people are very impatient with, well, how come it hasn't changed like that? Well, hey, we have to build it. It isn't here. Think of all the machinists who are really critical right now and central to the labor force, who are no longer machinists, who are out there doing gig stuff, who've lost their skill set, things have advanced, etc. We've got to train up. We've got to really go through a mobilization to build it. And that's really the Democrats know that. And they're using the fact that it takes time to build that. And they think you all are really stupid out there and that you have limited attention spans. And therefore they can say, okay, he didn't change it in 20 months, so therefore he's a failure. Well, you're not looking at what physically where we were at and what it's going to take to actually get to where we're going. And that's the message which we actually have to figure out how to really convey to people, because I don't believe that you all are stupid. And that's kind of, if you think about what they're trying to do, that's what it's based on.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Mother of Pearl, for joining us. I hope we answered your questions. Just some house cleaning things here. So I'm already seeing it. So I'm broadcasting. If you're watching the stream, I'm broadcasting both in a vertical TikTok style format. I'm also broadcasting the traditional widescreen format. If you go to our channel, if you just click on our channel page, you can switch between both streams. So I want everyone to know that. Also, just as a reminder, we have a lot of new people in the chat today. Some people are saying some pretty crazy stuff. You can always block somebody in the chat. YouTube is really inconsistent about who sees what. So if something irritates you, come up in the chat, just block the person on your side so you don't have to see them again. Okay, thank you everyone for voting. I really appreciate our audience. Definitely is on the right track. They're picking the right issues. DSA, communism, and Debs, because that's really our enemy going into the midterm. And Canada is a second thing. I'm happy to see the data center issue and the Muslims are taking over issue to score lower in this. So we're going to go directly to this issue of the midterms, the DSA, and issue of communism in the United States, which is becoming a thing. Let me take down this thing here. All right. So let me jump here to question number 26. 26. Here we go. Okay. Gail says, it seems like several elected representatives and some running for office are not natural born citizens, but became citizens while living here. When becoming a U.S. citizen, you are asked to learn our history, laws, and live by the Constitution. I am wondering, how is it legal to run for public office on a communist socialist platform that denounces the very values they took an oath to uphold to become a citizen? They are essentially claiming that they are seeking to destroy our republic, which I find very upsetting, and it seems illegal to me. Why is this allowed? Thank you, Gail. Veronica says, many years ago, I was taught in school the following formula. Russia's political system is communism. Their economic system is socialism. Their religious system is atheism. The USA political system is a constitutional republic. Our economic system is capitalism, and our religious system is Judeo-Christianity. I never hear this comparison anywhere. Is it forgotten civics, or did my teacher oversimplify socialism? Thank you, Veronica. I think so many people feel the same way. Donald says, President Trump needs to have his education secretary require a Declaration of Independence and our Constitution taught in at least high school or middle school, along with the horrors of socialism and communism. The previous education secretaries removed it from our schools, so let's put it back and regain our youth's minds. Thank you, Donald. And this last one here from Dogstar. Susan, your recent video showed a different flyer than I had seen. I got flyer 3. Okay. I've been thinking about young, indoctrinated Democrat socialists, the new Democratic Socialist Party. I don't know why people call it the Democratic Party. It's the Democrat Party. Anyway, they must have seen the movie that had the trailer with, I'm going to take down the whole corrupt system. It's going to be biblical. That alone could explain the idea that we want to destroy Western civilization. And they don't understand that President Trump is taking down the globalist system, which is what the movie was referring to. Sometimes a movie clip like that has a lasting impact on groups looking for a purpose. They just misunderstand what the system needs to be taken down because many don't research and don't know about the American system we originally had before the globalist system. Your history classes are excellent for helping people learn how our country was originally structured, where we had decent wages, stable full-time jobs, and national sovereignty. Thank you for all you do. Thank you, Dogstar, for sending in your question this week. So this really sets the stage. Barbara, Bruce, what do you have to say?
Well, I'll start. I'm sure Bruce will have more. But look, the point here is that, number one, there's no difference between the Democrat Party right now and the DSA or Communist Party as it would be. If you look at what the Democrats have actually stand for, they've had one purpose throughout the entire period from 2016 forward, and that is take out Donald Trump by any means necessary. All right, that's their purpose and has been their purpose. What's going on now is that the people who they thought were their, if you will, Jacobin force to actually do riots, to actually do all the things which we saw in the summer of 2020, they've empowered as a destructive force. In my view, that's really what is going on at this point. Michael Schellenberger has a very interesting piece talking about how Nancy Pelosi actually viewed the first round of these people coming into Congress known as the Squad. Okay, and what he says happened is that Pelosi made a deal. She said, it's okay for you to do all the woke crap, all right, and the woke stuff, but just drop all of this economic populism, the populism which obviously elected Trump in 2016 and also resulted in a huge vote for Bernie Sanders in 2016, because we'll make a deal with you guys, we'll accommodate your philosophy, but you got to drop the attacks on Wall Street and you got to drop the overall attacks on our form, Pelosi's form, you know, the richest lady in Congress, you know, manipulating the stock market from inside. You got to stop. You can't attack our form of capitalism. All right. So they're totally accommodated to this. Destroying Western civilization. Why is that such a big deal? Well, what the communists actually realized, and it's really in the writings of Antonio Gramsci, who I call kind of the patron communist saint in terms of theory of the DSA, is he said the reason why Marxism and communism didn't spread like Karl Marx predicted in Europe or the United States was because of this thing called Western civilization, religion, the actual foundations of, you know, Western civilization. And that is permeates the entire culture. People believe in God. They don't believe, and they believe that there's a spiritual being who's essentially, inherent in the entire universe. They don't believe that material relationships alone is what life is all about. They don't believe, as both Marxism and traditional British capitalism would say, that man is simply a rooting animal or like a beast with some kind of extra apparatus in terms of sensory perceptions. All right, so Gramsci said the way that we bring about revolution is first, we got to destroy Western civilization. All right, if you collapse and destroy Western civilization, people will be unmoored. They won't know how to actually think of themselves or identify themselves as a coherent culture. And so that's what we've got to do first. And that's what has been a rallying cry of the DSA. It's what's, basically, if you think about it, it's what the attacks on men and the patriarchy in our society is about. It's about what the attacks on religion throughout this entire period have been about. It's about this whole emphasis on any form of sexuality which you want to exhibit, no matter how bestial. Just let it go. That's freedom. All right. All of those things I just mentioned are part and parcel of the actual Democrat Party platform. What do you think they actually said, in terms of the last period of time? What's the civil rights movement? It's not blacks or Hispanics or anything like that. It's gays and transsexuals. All right. So you're seeing right before you this entire attack. The homeless criminal, all right, is the person we all should be rallying around, not Elon Musk or anybody who says we should be going to space and inhabiting the universe. Think about the difference between those two worldviews, which is very, very stark. So that's how I begin to tell you there's no difference between the Democrat Party. And people keep saying, oh, there's the moderate Dems or there's the resistance. If you look at what they actually believe, it's just a slightly less insane form of the same stuff. Open societies, uncontrolled immigration, the whole aspect of driving down all of our energy and never producing anything, having windmills of solar power, and having a world government in which we're just another colony. All right, we shouldn't. That's what having empathy for other peoples of the world means. There's a book out called Suicidal Empathy, which actually talks about this, as in how do you commit suicide as a civilization? Well, you're looking at it. If you're looking at the present Democrat Party and you're looking at the DSA. And that's why this midterm election is so very, very important. We don't just have to win by small margins. The American people have to rise up like lions and demolish these people. So that's how I'd answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Barbara. I want to just reiterate something that I think is super important. It's this guy right here, Antonio Gramsci. I think it's important to realize that the type of virulent socialism that's taking over the United States, it's not the traditional Marxism of the past. It's actually been upgraded, this guy. So the more you start researching this guy, Gramsci and his life and his influence on other people, start talking about this guy more often with others. We need to shine more light onto this history, because this is what the DSA is basing their entire platform on. Bruce, what do you have to say about this communist takeover of the United States?
Couple things. I heard an interesting interview on X today, which was an excerpt from one of these Mark Halpern Next Up videos, and he was interviewing a woman named Evan Barker, who's written a book called Nothing Left: Confessions of a Democratic Operative. And what was interesting is that what she says is she grew up in Kansas. She was a working class kid. She got involved in Democratic politics with Obama, and then got very much involved in the progressive movement and rose up to in the ranks of the progressive movement, and became a very prominent fundraiser for the progressive movement. And he asked her, well, who gives money to keep this progressive movement going? And she says, billionaires. She said, the money I raise, she said, except for some people like Bernie Sanders and AOC who have big lists, most of the progressive movement is all being financed by billionaires, mostly heiresses, people you don't know, who are heiresses to hedge funds or oil company fortunes. Of course, Soros is one of them, who she says, pours huge amounts of money through front companies into independent expenditure committees in support of every single one of these ultra progressive candidates. Now, and she also made the point that she got involved in politics because she said, it should be supporting the working class. But none of these issues that the progressives support are so ginned up about, stopping ICE, defunding the police, men and women's sports, all these crazy things that they're really for, have anything to do with the economics of working people. And this is not only telling about what the actual progressive movement is. It's a movement that's funded. It's a Jacobin movement funded by billionaires for the purpose of destroying the independent power of a sovereign United States that's beholden to the American people, most of whom are not college-educated white heiresses who, care about gender equality issues. They're people who want to produce, want to grow, want to industrialize, want to be productive. Now, this is not new. We talk about Gramsci, but if you go all the way back to the origins of Marx and communism, it comes out of the French Revolution. The French Revolution, there were two revolutions in the 18th century, the American Revolution, the French Revolution. The American Revolution was based on Judeo-Christian principles. The founding fathers were inspired by the Hebrew Bible, as well as studying Greece and Rome and all this other stuff. But they were really motivated by both the lessons of that are in the Bible, of how you organize a society based on morality and based on God's love. The French Revolution went the other way. They chopped off the statues of all the cathedrals. They swore that it was a triumph of the mathematicians. Everything that was religious, everything that believed in God was destroyed. And instead, it was a return to Roman law and Roman mathematics and Roman principles. And that's not to say that there wasn't evil and in the Ancien regime, which had ties to the Catholic Church and so on and so forth, because a lot of bad things can be done in the name of religion as well. But in the United States, it was completely different because we didn't have a state church. We allowed freedom in this country. And so the government power and morality came from the free will of the people to create a society, to create a government based on the principles that today we, in shorthand, will call Judeo-Christian principles. And it was in the heart of the people. And that was contrasted to what happened in France, which then turned into a bloody revolution where they lopped off the heads of everybody they could find, and you ended up with a dictatorship under Napoleon. So the mistake is to think that Marx invented something new. He didn't. Marx just adapted to an already existing movement in Europe that was organized against the American idea, against the American system. And it was a European idea funded by billionaires, the equivalent of billionaires. The wealthiest banking, financial institutions in Europe funded this movement that later became known as communism And parenthetically, the term capitalism as an economic system was invented by Karl Marx. It's not a system. There's the American system and there's the British system. What people sometimes call capitalism turns out to be an invention of Karl Marx. But Marx did not invent something new. He inherited a movement that was funded by the enemies of the United States and the American Revolution, and was deployed to prevent the spread in the middle of the 19th century of the American system to Europe. Because you had the Civil War. All the European powers, except for Russia and Germany, supported the slavocracy in the South. There was a movement in Europe to actually adopt American system principles. We don't have time to go into details on this, but we have a lot of information about it on our website. And so communism and Marxism was launched as an attack to prevent the American system from spreading to Europe. And it was funded by the same wealthy financial elites who were supporting the Confederacy and the slavocracy to destroy the American system in the United States. And that's what the socialist movement in this country is today. It's just an extension of that. That's why studying Gramsci is important, and also understanding where this whole movement came from. I can recommend actually a good book to read on this is Charles Dickens' Tale of Two Cities, which talks about the French Revolution in Britain, and you can see how this evolved. Anyway, it's a long discussion, but that's what I would throw out there. You're not looking at a grassroots movement here. You're looking at, a bunch of Jacobins who are financed by billionaires who are out to destroy America. And they ain't for the working class.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Barbara. We got a question came in, super chat came in, BYW99. First off, I don't remember seeing your name here, so thank you very much for joining us. Barbara, how do you think it's looking in the midterms? Do you think Trump Elon will do a Democrat wink wink in this election if they have to?
I think things, first of all, don't believe any of the polls. The polls and the narratives that are out there are, extraordinary, and they're aimed at one thing: to demoralize those Trump voters out there and convince them that coming out is not going to do any good, and to prevent you from actually really seeing things clearly. And my dog's going crazy over the people mowing the lawn in the back, so be with him here as he barks a little bit. At any rate, the point is that right now, if you believe the polls, we're behind. We could lose the Senate, and if we lose the Senate and they take the House, which is widely predicted, as Trump says, he's going to get impeached, and the whole thing, the whole revolution, which is a real revolution. Come here, Scott. Hey, which is a real revolution, is going to basically be ended. So that's how you got to think about it. And everything you're seeing in the media is based on the fact that they think, by throwing all this crap out there about how Trump's controlled by Israel, about how, Trump's corrupt, about how he's having an affair with Natalie Hart, about all of this stuff, which is just, in my view, just vomit being thrown at you, quite frankly, is designed to demoralize you from that singular objective. We got to turn people out. They got to understand what's going on in terms of rebuilding the economy. And I don't think, wink, wink, that he's going to need to do that, whatever it is you're referring to, wink, wink, because I really think that the people at this point really do understand that at a fundamental level. They're just being barraged by the type of stuff we have to undercut, which is just a huge demoralization campaign. You have idiots, crazy people like Tucker Carlson currently, who played a very big role in actually helping Trump get elected. All right. Kind of the second layer of, what Peter Navarro was talking about. You need megaphones out there in terms of the economy. We're trying to function as exactly that, telling people what's actually going on. But, they shoot. This is a shooting war. They killed Charlie Kirk. They've tried to kill Trump 3 times. Do you have the gumption and the will to actually save the country? Because you got to basically just get focused and say, okay, we got a mission. 10 people, 15 people, I'm taking to the polls. I'm going to start organizing now. I'll talk to Promethean Pack on the boot camp about any problems I'm having, getting through to people. And we're going to try and provide you materials to help you do that. But this is the thing we got to focus on right now. It's what Stephen Miller said at the outset: the Trump voter has got to turn out. If we do that, we win. All right. It's too big to rig. There's a lot of stuff going on to help with election integrity and everything else, but the fundamental principle remains the same as it was in 2024. Too big to rig. So that's how I'd answer your question. Wink, wink.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, BYW, for joining us. Bruce, any thoughts on this?
Well, no, I think that it's going to be a tough fight, but, it boils down, it's going to boil down to, a few states where there are close Senate races and a few congressional districts. We've gotten some good progress with the redistricting that moves things in favor of the Republicans. We have some interesting results from the primaries, which set the Republicans up to really do something that's unprecedented, which is to keep the House and expand in the Senate. Actually, if you remember, in 2018, Trump became the first president who actually gained seats in the Senate during the midterm election. So we're in a position to do it. But I really think, as Barbara said, you got to get out there and we've got to mobilize, our people. And I think, the Democratic Socialists are doing everything they can to help us. And it's not just the case where a Republican is running against the DSA or DSA light candidate, like up in Michigan with the Senate race. But if you vote for a Democratic majority in the House, you are empowering the most extreme of the Democratic Party into power. They're not going to be the minority of the party. Barbara mentioned the deal that Nancy Pelosi made with these people. She made a deal with them when they were running, but once they got in there, she went along with virtually with everything they wanted. And you think Hakeem Jeffries is going to stand up to the squad and to the DSA? No. If you elect the Democratic member of Congress, you are voting for the most extreme of the DSA. And there's no question about it, no matter what they say they are. Anybody who says they're a moderate Democrat, it doesn't exist because they won't actually be able to stand up to that pressure.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, BWY99, for joining us today. I'd also like to give a shout out to Teresa. Teresa, thank you very much. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Ginny, thank you very much for joining us today. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We have a free email newsletter. The link is in the description. You can also go there if you'd like to give us a $10 a month sustaining subscription. You can also do that, but the link for our newsletter is in the description. We have both a daily and a weekly product. Thank you, Ginny, for joining us today. And Mercenary X21, I think you're raising something that I agree with, but I think it's important because it's raising a wider issue about the changes that are actually going on in society that everyone's seeing. Speaking of schools and giving them actual lessons in civics, we should also bring back gun classes and make it mandatory. An armed society is a polite society, after all. Teach restraint and discipline. Yes, I agree with what you're going with here. There is definitely a breakdown of the common bonds that keep our citizens united. And I think there's been a massive push through operations like Gramsci and the DSA to really split the United States into multiple warring factions. And I think that's really at the heart of what you see with this. I mean, I'm here in Southern California, luckily in a very nice area, but you start going closer into Los Angeles City, and just the amount of disrespect that people show to one another is absurd. Bruce and Barbara, how do you address not necessarily the gun question directly, but the social question where you're really getting people that are just disrespectful in public, right? Disrespecting their own citizens. How do we actually fix this problem?
Well, I think J.D. Vance makes some very good points in his book talking about his return to a religious identity from his earlier stance as a student and elsewhere of kind of alienation from his family, from the culture he grew up in, and from the community he grew up in. The problem is that we've created, or it has been created for us, a very, very atomized society where people don't have bonds to their community. They don't have bonds to their church. They don't have the things that actually make a civil society civil. It's all based on, looking at that screen on your phone or whatever, 24 hours a day, and not really talking to other people, not really going out and having conversations with other people in a social way about what's going on in the world. What do you think? How's it going, etc. I'm reminded of the enormous civilizing influence the military had, or has still, on our people. If you talk to anybody who's actually come through the military and been in a situation in which their life depended on how well they communicated with other people in very dramatic situations in which they were expected to perform, you find a level of discipline and very similar to what it used to be like all over the country, because you had these kind of social bonds within something you could actually define as civil society. Our founders, basically, if you think about the debates which took place around the Constitution, these were open debates in the population. Hamilton, the Federalist Papers, everybody wrote out there what their thoughts were about what the Republic should be like. They examined, before the Revolution, all of human history in terms of models of government, looked at the failures, looked at the successes. They thought about physical economy and science. That is a big difference between our revolution and a manipulated revolution like the French Revolution, where, if you think about it, it was run very similar, as Bruce said, to the way the DSA and everything else runs today. You created a mob called the Jacobins, and you turn them loose on the population. The British did that. It's very well documented, in order to prevent the American Revolution and this educated idea from spreading. And the people of France, in general, they had something sprung on them. They hadn't really thought it through. They hadn't really deliberated as a society about it as our founders did. Friedrich Schiller said, the French Revolution, it was a great moment, but it found a small people. What was he talking about? Well, he was shocked when the whole thing turned to exactly how this will turn out. And I predict it. If we elect the DSA, if we elect the Democrats in the midterms, you're going to ultimately get what was in the French Revolution called Thermidor, what was in the Communist Revolution in China called the Cultural Revolution. You're going to get the elimination of all of the intellectual forces in society at the guillotine, and you're going to have, a dictator or outright fascism like Napoleon come in the wake of that. That's how these things actually work. So I'm giving you a long answer because your perception is urgent. It's not going to happen unless citizens take up exactly this type of education with their friends and neighbors right now. And then we'll get it into the schools as a major proposition. But, we have to break that type of social isolation and lack of discipline, beginning right now with this mobilization around the midterms. And it's a big task.
I would say that just two things to add. I think obviously fundamentally this question that Barbara pointed out that J.D. Vance has been talking about, we have to bring people back to religion, and it's not a particular denomination, but I think the work that the churches are doing and to bring people back to dealing with these questions is important. Also, strengthening the family. A government can't do anything to bring people back to religion. That's a mistake. But a government can do things to make it less unfriendly to be religious and to form families and to keep families together. And that has some economic implications. As far as education, one thing I like is what Senate candidate, Republican Senate candidate Mike Rogers is talking about in Michigan, is to bring back shop classes in schools, and not just for boys, but for girls too. And I think this should be in elementary schools as well, because when young people have to work in teams to build something, to construct things, when you're dealing with building something real and constructing it, it's not a matter of opinion. It really has to fit together. You have to confront how the real world works. And when you do it in a team with a few people, and you not only develop teamwork, but you get a mutual sense of accomplishment. Look what we put together as a group. And there's a kind of social interaction there that happens that young people love to be involved in, and also will develop the kind of skills and discipline in our society that I think will have radiating benefits far beyond just the schools. I'd really like to see that emphasis in schools, in addition to the classical education and so forth.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Barbara. And my 2 cents here, I know what Lyndon would have said. He would have said, and Barbara already touched on it, it's mission orientation. That's why in times of war, when a nation has mission orientation, like Barbara said, it has a civilizing influence on people. They learn how to work together as a nation, as a team, right? So I think that's ultimately what's been lost in the United States. There's no shared, what's the shared mission of the United States? You go ask the DSA, they're going to say there is no mission, or it's some evil mission to destroy X, Y, and Z, right? And then, so I think that's ultimately the challenge, is bringing back a sense of mission orientation back to the United States to really fix this issue of, here, let me pull up your other thing too. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I grew up in Inglewood. Yeah, I'm very blessed to live in the greater San Diego area where people are much more normal around here. But man, yeah, so the mission orientation, it's what's lacking in society. So thank you, Mercenary, for joining us today. I want to give a quick shout out here to Silver Squirt. I'm sorry I can't pull up your little super sticker here, but thank you very much for joining us. Just as a reminder, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because we do 3 pre-recorded political briefs a week. Our next one's going to be on Saturday, so please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Okay, we have plenty more super chats. I want to give a shout out to Susan Hogan. Thank you for joining us again. And thank you always for the generous super chat. You mentioned Bannon in the beginning and our great Peter Navarro, and that's what my comment was going to be about. Bannon has gone the way of doom and gloom. And we have to be careful and filter all of our media. He's a big voice, and we need to be louder. Barbara, your thoughts?
Well, all these people, you know, Mark Mitchell, you know, the pollster, Bannon, you know, the Black Pillars. They've been doing that. I think Bannon fundamentally is a very conflicted person. I think Peter Navarro got the best of him yesterday and brought out the best of what Bannon can actually do by reminding him of, you know, the role he actually had in 2016 and what 2016 was actually about. Yes, it had to do slightly with the CCP in China, who one suspects, you know, has a kind of role in whatever Bannon's funding is at this point. But the point is that it was about the working class and the middle class. People should know that the middle class has always been the target of communism, the bourgeoisie, as Marx and everybody has described them. The people who actually who rose up through the ranks of industrial capitalism and sort of proved that it worked from the standpoint of social mobility. The Democrat Party has long ago abandoned any idea of being for the working class. That's what Stephen Miller emphasized, which is what I thought was so striking in the beginning of the show. Think about what the Republican Party used to be in terms of the working class and what Trump did. He stole the whole base of the party, of the Democrats, all right, and turned it back to its natural place with the Republicans of Abraham Lincoln, not the Republicans of Mitch McConnell and all the rhinos in the Congress or anybody who is just a clone of a Wall Street speculator. And, you know, Bannon is a very conflicted person, as are a lot of the people who, you know, were around the so-called coalition in the first place. The point is, as Navarro said, we ought to have just one objective coming into the midterms, showing people what the difference is between the economy they actually lived in for the past period, which is, you know, a free trade, free market economy, Adam Smith, versus the economy the president is building, which is Alexander Hamilton, Abraham Lincoln, William McKinley, and actual prosperity for the working class. Why? Because we believe, as Trump believes, that it is the productive power of your working class which actually makes an economy or breaks it. It's not a bunch of professionals doing coding, okay? It's whether you can actually transfer an invention into a new technology which raises the overall living standard of the population. That's physical economy, what we actually talk about as physical economy. And yes, we have to become very loud, and I think that was Peter Navarro's point to Steve Bannon yesterday, is stop your black pilling. This is the message you got to be getting out. It's got to be getting out 24 hours a day and through multiple voices.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And I'm going to continue this. I'm just going to add 2 cents in here and say, anyone, make an offer to people here. If you want to join with us in making a splash in the midterm elections, if you want to actually help do it. So Barbara is treasurer of Promethean PAC. We have 2 organizations, right? Promethean Action, which is hosting the show right now. Promethean Action is an ideas and issues organization. We can talk about ideas, we can talk about issues, but we can't directly participate in the election itself. That's the role of Promethean PAC that Barbara is the treasurer of. I pulled up the Promethean PAC website right here in the upper right-hand corner, or if you're on mobile, it'll just be in the menu. Come to our midterm boot camp sign up. What we're basically doing with our midterm boot camp is helping people become an activist, a political activist. And we know because we've been doing this kind of work for decades, just how challenging it is to break into this space. All kinds of uncertainties, all kinds of inner demons and inner witches start coming out. Come work with us. Check out Promethean Pact's midterm boot camp. It's simply prometheanpact.com. I will pull up here the website. Barbara, can you say anything about our midterm boot camp process really quick?
It's sort of what I talked about. People get together. We have this goal called, bring 10 to 15 people to the polls in November from your friends. That's challenging if your friends and closest associates have TDS, Trump delusion syndrome. That's challenging if you live in a blue state where you're surrounded by people who have TDS. That's also challenging just for anybody to actually say, okay, how do I actually go out and talk about, even to Trump supporters, why this is so important, why they shouldn't believe all the stuff they're being fed about how this is a losing cause and we're just electing a bunch of new rhinos and this, that, and the other. How do I actually confront that? How do I actually explain the American system to people and how it's different than what they're living through? That's what we try and do on the boot camp. We're organizing you to figure out how you're going to organize the people around you. And we take your questions, anything goes, and we actually try and support you as best we can. And it helps us because it feeds into what is it that we got to produce as literature, as door tags, as everything else that are going to meet the problems that the population is having with this head on, so that we can actually address it. So that's the point of the boot camp, and everybody's invited. It's really, really, really important, and it will help you meet this goal we just set.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And I think I'm going to pull up a super chat here from Josh. Thank you, Josh, for waiting patiently here. And Anthony, I also have a super chat here. I'm going to take that one next. So just hang on for a sec. Josh says, is there a Promethean Action silver bullet slogan that can be used for the midterms, even in the deepest of blue states, like where I am in Massachusetts? I encourage everyone to subscribe to the channel. Barbara, would you say that bring 10 people to the polls with you would be the slogan?
Something like that, 10 to 15, set your goal high, be a human. Don't actually join the animals on the other side.
Thank you. Yeah, Josh, it's going to be especially challenging if you are in a deep blue state like Massachusetts. But I don't think that you should, even people in deep blue states should try to bring their MAGA, make sure you bring your MAGA supporters to the polls. Make sure they get out and vote in any way possible. Bruce, any thoughts on what we've been discussing here? I'm sorry, I muted you again. You were feeding back.
One thing on the Massachusetts suggestion is check out New Hampshire. There's some lively races. The Senate race is one that the Republicans might pick up, possibly, in New Hampshire. I think there's a congressional race too that's considered close. So if you want to, have an impact on, I know in Massachusetts it's impossible because it's all districted to Democrats, but that would be one thing I would suggest. Just in terms of the other thing we were discussing is there's a certain quality of Trump, which I think is really important. It just gets at the underlying thing is that you can see he really loves people. And, when you see him in some of these unguarded moments, or even scripted ones, like he had the lifeguard who saved that young boy into the Oval Office. And the other night he was up in Long Island, and the parents of the young boy who was killed in a drive-by, and he left the stage and went and greeted them and comforted them. Yesterday he gave a tour of the new construction in the White House with the helipad, with all these construction workers around and all the press and so forth. And you could see his great love and appreciation for people who work and people who produce. And this is a stark contrast to the emotion of the DSA and the communists, which just seem to hate everything. They're just like the most hateful, grouchy, grumpy, constipated people. Like they've got something really wrong going. They got bad heartburn or something, And you compare it to Trump, who just loves people, loves to embrace them. That sort of tells you a little bit more about what the difference is than all the policy discussions.
Thank you, Bruce. And thank you, Josh, for joining us every week. Super enjoy having you here. And one day when I get back up to when I come back to visit the East Coast, I'm going to have to come up to Massachusetts. Definitely hang out at your bar there. Thank you for joining us. Jane Silver Queen, thank you very much for your super sticker. Sorry, can't pull it up here. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Kevin Knapp, thank you. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you for tuning in. Again, make sure you're subscribed. And Anthony Peterson, thank you very much, brother, for joining us. He says, where I live, the new fight is, and I think you meant to say NGOs, is corporate government NGOs usurping economic expansion and muting a technologically developed workforce, and student work ethic development in the post-fentanyl crisis. I wish maybe you can give us a little. What NGOs specifically would you say are operating, and how exactly are they muting the workforce? But yeah, the student work ethic development in the post-fentanyl crisis. Yeah, that's definitely. I don't even know what state you're from. Oh, non-disclosure agreements. So okay, I see. Thank you, Anthony. I see. Government non-disclosure agreements usurping economic expansion and muting a technologically developed workforce from preventing.
Yeah, I know what he's talking about.
Yeah. Okay. And Okay. So Bruce, want to comment?
Yeah, he's talking about these working low retail establishments and so forth are forcing people to sign non-disclosure agreements so they can't switch jobs. I think that might be what he's talking about. Like even like hairdressers and barbers, or if they get a contract to work in some place, are not allowed to go work at another place. If that's what he's talking about, I agree. That's a real problem in terms of preventing people from being able to have economic mobility.
What he's also talking about is the NDAs also deal with the actual, trade practices of companies, etc. So if I go to work for Google, let's say, and I basically have access to all of Google's technologies and even breakthrough technologies, my NDA prevents me from ever telling anybody about that if I go to another job. There's a legitimate corporate interest in that. Obviously, you don't want to have your intellectual property actually stolen if you're a corporation. But at the same time, it massively inhibits popular education of things which could be really important economic breakthroughs. So there's got to be some kind of balance there. The fentanyl thing is actually, I think, dealing with the fact that young people were really the targets of this entire, killer operation of importing once you take it, you're either addicted or you're dead type of drug. And that's a real problem in terms of how do you bring people back from that culture into a productive culture. Apprenticeships are one thing. Susan has a wonderful idea, which she's actually talking about. In the hood in Detroit, one of the major companies there put up signs in the hood saying, "Wouldn't you rather be building submarines? Call this number." And what happened was that they got overwhelmed with applications from the most horrible area of Detroit, to come in and actually learn a trade. And, you know, she says that basically just off that sign, 10 people from the hood are now working on sophisticated technologies, building submarines. There are all sorts of programs going on all across the country now to train up the workforce we need to, you know, actually build right now this program. Right here in where I live, you know, Google is running a electrical training program for young people. They're on TV advertising it every single day. And they're saying, if you get accepted, we're going to guarantee you a job. You have 6 months of training. We will guarantee you a job with one of our contractors. You make $150,000 a year and come join us. All right. Because we need to train up the skilled workforce. And I think that's part of, you know, what you're actually talking about there, which I'm very hopeful about as an answer to this problem of, you know, a drug, social media, and otherwise addicted population, which actually was engineered that way. That was the intention of all the fentanyl flooding the country. We're going to either kill you or we're going to hook you, and there won't be a workforce for a future generation.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Anthony, for joining us again this week. Love having you here. Deba Dora, thank you, friend, again from earlier. Keep triggering the trolls with facts that can't be debunked. Thank you, Promethean Action, and God bless President Trump. And God bless you, Deba, for joining us and joining with us in this epic, literally epic fight to save human civilization. Really, worldwide fight. We have supporters from all over the world. Thank you very much for joining in with us. Love having you here. All right, we have plenty more topics. I'm going to switch back to our email newsletter questions, and I'm going to talk about, let me take off this banner here. I'm going to talk about Canada next, because that was the other topic that people wanted us to discuss. So let's jump to that. Question 21. So we have 5 questions here on various angles of the Canadian situation. Oops. Wrangling StreamYard. Okay. Johan says, hiya, Barbara, Susan, Barbara, and Adam. Thank you for your brilliant updates and Mike's overviews. After watching Susan's midweek update, I'm from the UK. I was really appalled at a Canadian cabinet minister, Melanie Joly, crossing the border, talking to the opposition Democrats, gaining inventory on which American lawmakers she can approach who will take Canada's side, while in the middle of a trade war is ongoing. Sorry, I can't believe what I just wrote. This is absolutely shocking. I'm astounded, completely astounded. Simple question. Can President Trump throw Miss Joly out? Because I certainly would. This is so bad, deceitful, and bloody traitorous towards the American people and the administration. Wow, just wow. Thank you all. Love you all from the UK. Great job, Adam. Thank you very much, Johan. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sending in your question. But Jacqueline says, if Canada is going to oust our representative, then why can't we stop Canada's Secretary Joly from stepping 1 foot in the United States? Should we start a nationwide petition against her? The pushing of globalist propaganda in our country from another country should be illegal. She revoked her U.S. citizenship. We should revoke her passport as well. Thank you, Jacqueline. I have one from Charles. I'm a Canadian citizen of 52 years, originally from the UK. I left the UK originally because I didn't see any future here. Canada looked different then. Now, however, Canada is certainly not the country I left the UK for. My question is, how do you see President Trump responding in the long term to Mark Carney, who these days appears to be Mr. WEF, implementing policies that have the potential of removing any equity we own in our properties Canada-wide? Initially, I believe by a United Nations mandate. By a United Nations mandate. I also wonder how he could feel about having a potential communist country on his northern border, referring to President Trump. Thank you, Charles. And Robert says, hey, folks, keep up the great work. Can you please update us on the CUSMA deal? Thank you for all you do. Thank you, Robert, for sending that in. And Tim says, what is Trump's real plan for Canada? Canada has to be the #1 strategic partner for hemispherical defense, meaning Trump needs complete control over our borders. How will he achieve this? Very insightful question, Tim. Barbara, I think you have some idea.
Well, Carney, for those who don't know a lot about Canadian politics, and Susan does a big job on this in her midweek update, is the chosen guy for the globalists at this point. He's been that way ever since the World Economic Forum and the Munich Security Conference, where the Trump administration pretty much declared its policy of opposing globalism in all of its forms. He is the central banker of central bankers. He started out at the Canadian National Bank. He then went to, for the first time ever, somebody actually being at the Bank of England who was not an English aristocrat during a critical period. He's the guy who came out in 2016 and actually said, we need to get rid of Congresses. We need to get rid of their control over budgets. We need experts from the banking community to decide the budgets of any nation, and we need a world currency. So that pretty much gives you his bona fides as a British operative. What he has been doing is saying the way to get rid of Trump and to revitalize globalism, which he admits has failed, is to organize all what he calls the middle powers against both the United States and China, who he says are the new hegemons in the world. He's done dastardly things in Canada. He is trying to intervene in our elections, as the British Labour Party has tried to intervene in our elections since 2016. Don't lose sight of that. That was, a major. Why do you think, James Comey called Russiagate the Crown materials? Why do you think it was somebody from MI6 who actually wrote the dirty dossier on Trump? This is an overall battle between two ideas about what human beings are and what our relationship is to God and the universe. And the British system is a failed system, as our key founders have known all along. And we've been engaged in a battle really throughout our history because they've attempted to recolonize us. Right now, Canada is their spot, as it has been. Where do you think the assassins of Abraham Lincoln fled to? It has been a UK British Empire, colony set up to essentially harass us ever since its entire existence. If you want to look at Medicare for all, as the DSA is actually looking at it, look where that actually goes. You'll see it in Canada. We'll give you real Medicare if you're over age 60. In fact, just say you're depressed and we'll help you commit suicide. Saves a lot of money, very efficient. So, this is a battle, between two systems, of which Canada is just, the center of it. In terms of Trump getting the better of Mark Carney, in terms of trade, I think that's exactly what's happening. It's your typical Trump deal. He threatens the impossible, a 50% tariff, which would destroy the Canadian economy pretty damn quickly. Carney has to bow, and Trump already has what he wants to extract from him. We want our farmers to be able to export to Canada without any type of tariff on our farm products, zero. Trump says he got that. Trump also says that the XL pipeline may be coming back online. I think basically what you're seeing is just a small part of the battle which is going on throughout the world between these two systems. And it's the thing we have to constantly keep focused on. In terms of kicking them out of the United States, I think we're better than that, quite frankly. I don't think we need to kick them out. I think the American people basically just have to ignore them and not fall for any of their crap and recognize the Democrat Party as an enemy entity, pure and simple. So that's how I'd answer the other question.
Thank you, Bruce. Any thoughts on the issue of Canada and what's going on there right now?
Just thank God we finally have a president who will stand up to this crap coming from Canada. I just think it's just been going on for too long, and Canada has to heel to the U.S., not the other way around. I'm tired of their crap.
I think most Americans are. Thank you, Bruce. And I want to give a special shout out to our vertical stream viewers. If you're just learning about Promethean Action for the first time, thank you for joining us. Again, please make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We clip so many shorts of our videos. And on next Saturday, we're going to be doing our next political update that will also clip into a bunch of shorts. So please, guys, on the vertical stream, thank you for joining us. Okay, I'm going to move next question here to the issue of data centers, because it's an important issue for me personally, but it's also become a bit of a talking point for a lot of the people that are unsure about what Trump's economic strategy actually is. So I'm just going to take this one question on data centers. Donna says, AI data centers, what are they really? The populace, both sides, do not want them. Why are so many being built so fast? Why are they being shoved down we the people's throats? Thank you, Donna, for your question. We get so many questions on this topic now. Barbara and Bruce.
Well, I want to hype something for people. Bruce and Brian Lance will be giving a class on the Promethean Action class series, the Saturday class series, this Saturday, on both the breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and this entire issue of data centers. What are they? What are the problems? And what do we say about that? And what's the president doing about it? But I'd like to, on the basis of expertise here, I have some ideas about it, living in data center central in Virginia. But I basically want to turn it over to Bruce for him to give the initial answer on this.
Yeah, I live in Northern Virginia too, which is data center ground zero. We have more data centers per square inch than any other place in the world. And, granted, some of the implementation of the construction of the data centers and the procurement of the land and all that other stuff should have been done better. But data centers are now a central part of American infrastructure, of a modern economy. It's no different than railroads or nuclear power plants or anything else. And, it reminds me some of the attacks on the whole data center business is like the attacks on nuclear power back in the 70s and early 80s. We needed nuclear power back then, and we stopped it. It was the stupidest thing we ever did. And for 40 years, we haven't built nuclear power plants, and we're behind in terms of our production of electricity. And there was no reason. The same thing with, all the attacks on fracking, which allowed the United States to become economically independent. So we'll be talking about this more detail on Saturday, but, a lot of the discussion about AI is centered on, large language models and the use of this for, helping people do better search or organizing their calendars or something like that. And also in certain areas of business. But there's a whole nother side to AI, which is extremely exciting, which is physical AI. Brian Lance and I will be going over this on Saturday. But this kind of technology is essential to the kind of innovation and rapid increases in productivity. I'm not talking about, being able to, book a restaurant reservation, faster, or plan out your next vacation to Europe. I'm talking about real physical production, building things that will people need, that will heal people, that will make life better for most people. And the data centers are simply infrastructure that's required for that. Now, one criticism I can make to some of the companies that are building these data centers, and I think they're beginning to get the idea, is that, you know, these are rich companies, they've got lots of money. Meta has started to do this, some of the others, Google, invest in the communities where you're building these data centers. Meta in Louisiana is building a big data center. They gave some money to the local school system, which gave $50,000 bonuses to all the teachers. They've pledged $1.5 billion to promote, you know, fire, police, first responders, and so forth. Here in Loudoun County, which is the center of the data centers, the actual fact that we have so many data centers has lowered the property taxes. So, you know, this is something that has to be done. The second thing that Trump has emphasized, which is really important, is that the companies that are building these data centers have to produce their own electricity and to run their centers and sell it back into the grid. Those are the kinds of things which have to happen. But most of the criticisms of the data centers are misplaced. And the fact is we need them because they're part of the infrastructure of real physical AI. And when you look at the whole picture, you're going to see we need this just as much as we need railroads, water systems, and everything else. So we got to do them better, but we're going to have to do them.
I agree, Bruce. And I want to add just my own 2 cents in this because this is my wheelhouse, is that I think just living in this modern world, Donna, I think people are very, very disconnected from the infrastructure that powers their lives. I love grid technology. I like learning about how we build these massive electrical grids. I can go to a switch, like a switch yard, and I can begin to pick out certain components, right? I actually like learning about the infrastructure that powers our lives. Data centers are no different. We're doing this entire interaction. You wrote us an email, your smartphone, your computer, all your appliances are run through data centers. If we stop building them, how are we going to keep doing this show? Social media isn't going away. Social media keeps growing. More and more people are becoming creators on these platforms. More videos have to be served. I bet most people spend hours a day on social media. Where is that computer that you're interacting with? It's not in the cloud somewhere. No, that's a physical building. Those are data centers. So I think people need to actually learn about how all the services that power your life are delivered to you, what it takes to deliver electricity, what it takes to deliver water, what it takes to deliver your internet service and power your smartphones and help make the chips. So yes, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, Donna, for sending in your question. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everyone who's still with us. We have plenty more to keep going here. So I'm going to switch back to an international question now. We're going to hit George Soros and his connection to London. So here we go. Patricia says, to Barbara Boyd, I just listened to your podcast on the similarities between Obama and the Democratic candidates. You brought up that George Soros was an agent for MI6. How did that role play into Soros's breaking the British bank by shorting the pound? How and why would they do that? Thanks. Love Promethean Action. Thank you, Patricia. So, Barbara, can you speak a little bit more on this George Soros MI6 connection here?
Well, it's a little bit deeper than MI6. You know, basically, the way that I always recommend on every show that people read Richard Poe's book about how the British invented communism and changed and blamed the Jews. And if they're really energetic, they should pick up Carol Quigley's book about tragedy and hope, which tells you how the British elites, who are oligarchs, all operate. And the intelligence services are just kind of one aspect of things that they do. with respect to shorting the British pound, that, in our view, was basically set up to create the basis for Britain joining the EU. In other words, completely screwing up any idea of the UK's sovereignty and setting them up to actually join the EU because of needing to do that to survive at that point in time. Soros, basically, is a creature of British finance. He used to, when he was first moved to New York, manage the Queen's money itself. I actually wrote a piece about that, and I'm writing another piece, which will be on Promethean Action's website shortly, a new pamphlet about, the difference. What was the real revolution to our young people? If you really want to be a real revolutionary, study our founders. Those were real revolutionaries. If you want to be a aristocrat, study the British manipulation of other revolutions and where those countries ended up. That's kind of the theme of the pamphlet I'm now writing, which will go into, towards the end, George Soros's role in some great detail. Because he's important, but he's important only because he's really a financier representative of a certain philosophical series of ideas. His mentor was a guy by the name of Karl Popper, who invented a term which he uses called open societies. Okay, Karl Popper was a lifelong advocate of Aristotle and British empiricism against what he saw as the American Revolution as being Platonic. Very interesting, isn't it? In terms of these two very different ideas about man. So that maneuver was essentially designed to throw the UK directly into the European Union at that point in time because of its actual financial destitution after the pound was collapsed. And it's obviously what Brexit tried to remedy, but now we're, through Carney and others and the British government, we're going to rejoin the EU because really that's the kind of arrangement we like. Hopefully, the British population, just like in Brexit, will say something like no to all of that crap. And I'm very hopeful about that.
Thank you, Barbara. And I have to give a quick shout out here. So first off, thank you, Greg. I can't pull up your super sticker or anything. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please consider getting our free email newsletter, links in the description. And also Dane says, fun matching Greg. Thank you, Dane, for joining us again. Thank you for sending $20. I'm pretty certain you're on the email newsletter, but I just want to say it again. Please make sure you're getting our free email newsletter. Thank you, everyone. We have plenty more questions here. So let's take a really simple one that gets to the point here. Whoops. Wrong one. No, go away. Okay. Sorry, this is StreamYard being really StreamYard's getting me. Okay. And so we're going to talk about the American system, which question number 17 here. Okay, so simple question. StreamYard. Simple question. What's your take on the move to the American system impact on our U.S. deficit? Thank you, Jake.
I'm going to throw that one over to Bruce because I need to get a drink of water before my voice goes.
Well, there's the short answer and the long answer. I'll give you the short one, which is that you're not going to do anything with the deficit unless you get back to the American system, because you're not going to pay off this deficit in money. You're going to grow your way out of it. Now, we're lucky we have Scott Bessent there as Treasury Secretary. He's probably the best Treasury Secretary we've had since Alexander Hamilton. both because I think he understands the American system, and most importantly, he understands what Trump wants to do and supports it. And he's brilliant, and he understands financial markets. A lot of people, including myself, understand financial markets on a general basis or a superficial basis, but this guy's actually operated on them, so he knows how they work. He knows how they're manipulated and so forth, and I think he's doing a brilliant job. So he's taking measures to make sure that we manage the deficit. We obviously, but the only way you're going to really reduce its effect on the economy is to grow the economy. And then the deficit becomes a much smaller percentage of GDP or of physical production than it is right now. So that's the point. If you continue to try and deal with the deficit using Keynesian or Friedmanite methods, that is by manipulating money, cutting budgets here and there, doing things monetarily or fiscally, it's never going to work. The only thing that's going to work is physical growth. And the only way you're going to get that is the American system. So that's the short answer.
Thank you. Any comments, Barbara?
No, I think that if he really wanted to go deep into this question, he should read Hamilton's piece on the public credit, where he actually talked about the fact that growth in the ways that he actually talked about would cure our actual bankruptcy. We were bankrupt at the end of the revolution. We were just basically bankrupt. We owed war debt all over the place, including the ability to pay our soldiers. And Hamilton wrote a report to Congress called On the Public Credit, in which he actually worked out a system to turn the debt into profit by actual physical economic growth. And if people actually want to dig into that on a deeper basis, I highly recommend that you dig into Hamilton a little bit, and it'll give you an insight which none of these bankers will ever again tell you about. So I think it's pretty important to know some of those basics also.
Thank you. And another question here on the American system. I think this is going to be the last one, but I think this is a really good question here, so I'm going to read it. Regarding Hamiltonian economics, it is evident that the economic system that built America is not the system we have now. I assume that greed and a departure from Christian ethics by American industrialists who built and run factories, and the uniparty congresses that strangled domestic production while opening the door for cheap imports, changed free market into crony capitalism. Our patent office was compromised, and the stolen or confiscated intellectual property of its inventors stifled innovation. Our industry and manufacturing base was gutted, and the middle class was decimated. I had never heard of Hamiltonian economics until I found Promethean Action. Is there a short definition? Is it reversing the uniparty cronyism and recreating all new loans, tax codes, tariffs, etc., and has no short definition? I agree. Is it reversing the uniparty cronyism, recruiting new loans, tax codes, tariffs, and has no short definition? Then I agree. If we tell the Turning Point USA generation to fight for the Milton Friedman free market status quo, we will lose them and our country. It has failed us entirely, but especially them, the younger generations, just like it was designed to. We boomers are the new tribe to be defined by neo-Marxism for vilification. I don't expect the TPUSA generation to listen to me more than 3 minutes. Please give us the elevator pitch. Thank you. Thank you, Don, for your insightful question and opening yourself up to us and trying to figure out what this American system is. Barbara and Bruce, how would you respond to Don, who's trying to figure out what this Hamiltonian system is, but he knows that the free market Milton Friedman thing is completely dead?
Well, I mean, you got to look at the experience of young people who lived through what they've lived through. Think about the 2008 financial collapse and who that hurt. It hurt the middle class. It hurt the working class. They were devastated by it. And we bailed out the world's banking establishment on their backs. Okay. Then think about COVID and the mandates and the totalitarianism and putting something in your body which may or may not kill you. You never know because we never did the studies. Who knows? That to them strikes them, I believe, as the height of complete irrationality as the present system. So the way I'm going to try and approach it, I think, is, do you really want to have a revolution? Then study the real revolutionaries, the guys they've tried to bury for over 250 years. All right. If you want to look at what you've lived through Milton Friedman's idea of capitalism. Did that come from America? No. Is libertarianism come from America, which is what's being sold to you? No, that came from Austria. All right. And the British and the UK and Cambridge University. Do you even know what the economy of the revolution was all about? Well, it was about how do you use your mind to actually change the universe? Pretty exciting stuff. And it's completely different than anything you've ever been told about the United States. So that's my beginning elevator pitch. I'm sure that people will help me perfect it. I being a boomer and confessing to, that kind of trait. But I actually think there are some boomers who realize that our entire generation was, I won't even put it in not so good words, but you also got to think about the crap which this boomer generation went through. When I started my political life, it was under John F. Kennedy. He got shot and killed. Susan will tell you, she started her political life under Robert F. Kennedy. He got shot and killed. When I really wanted to think about my social consciousness, I looked to Martin Luther King. He got shot and killed, all in the same year. And then we went to war in Vietnam for what purpose? Who knows? We were supposed to be defeating communism, but it ended up, basically inculcating large numbers of our troops in the dope trade and heroin. So the point is, this generation, I always like to ask my boomer friends, when did you decide to sell out? Because that's what it was. It was basically giving in to horrible events through a lack of guts and courage and the intellectual background to actually back that up. So the point is that, that's my defense of the insanity of my generation. But I have to admit it was crazy. And what it did to the younger people was really bad in terms of the fundamental thing each generation owes to the next. I'm supposed to be here to really make your life better, not to consume endless sex, drugs, and rock and roll and all the other stuff that came with the counterculture. So, that's a longer answer to a pitch, but I think you got to take all of that into account as you begin to actually think about it.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, thank you, everyone, today. I didn't get to a few questions here. I want to just give a quick shout out here to, I wanted to take this one. Daniel, thank you for sending in the super chat here. Come join us next week. Today's show is ending. Anthony, I got your other question. Mercenary, thank you for sending in your questions today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to be back live again next Thursday at the same time. Please make sure you're subscribed. Hit the bell icon. Our next political briefing is going to be this Saturday. Barbara and Bruce, any final words for our audience today?
I think we gave a lot.
Take my marching order to heart. 10 to 15 people, that's your task in November. Let's keep that up front.
Yes, even if that's just bringing a relative with you, making sure your uncle or your cousin gets to the polls. Everyone needs to try and bring people to the polls. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you live next week.